Good morning, everyone. My name is Kim Schroeder. I serve as the Associate Superintendent for Learning and Teaching in Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools. On behalf of CMS, I'm truly glad to see so many students, educators, and guests here with us today for this year's Student Dialogue. Events like this are important because they create a space for thoughtful conversation, the exchange of ideas. We are here to ask meaningful questions and learn how to engage with the complex issue of artificial intelligence and humanity. Your presence here today speaks to your willingness to think deeply and to engage responsibly with the world around you. We want to begin by thanking the ECHO Foundation for their partnership to facilitate these types of learning opportunities for us. They help us better connect to our global leaders. Speaking of global leaders, we are especially honored to welcome our special guest, Mr. Eli Collins. Mr. Collins brings powerful experiences and insights that connect directly to the purpose of today's dialogue. His work challenges us to reflect, to question, and to consider our own roles as students, citizens, and community members. We are grateful for his time and for his willingness to engage with our students in meaningful conversation. As we begin, I want to encourage everyone to listen with intention, speak with respect, and remain open to perspectives that may be different from your own. The goal today is not just to hear words, but to understand ideas and to leave this space thinking a little differently than when you arrived this morning. Thank you again for being here. With that said, it is my pleasure to welcome Stacy Schondlin, President of the ECHO Foundation.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Stacy Schondlin, President of the ECHO Foundation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the ECHO Student Dialogue. Thank you, Dr. Schroeder, for your kind welcome. We are thrilled to be here at Waddell High School and deeply appreciative of your support. I also want to thank Superintendent Crystal Hill, Samantha Zapata, and the CMS communication team and volunteers. To our ECHO Board of Trustees, our co-founder and President Emerita Stephanie Ansaldo, and the CMS Board of Education leaders joining us here today, thank you for all you do to support the education and growth of Charlotte students. To every student and teacher who is here today, thank you for being part of this experience. The ECHO Foundation exists for one reason: to help young people grow into compassionate, informed, and courageous leaders who can make the world a better place. The Student Dialogue is part of our Voices Against Indifference initiative, created to elevate student voices and engage you in the issues shaping our future. For 28 years, ECHO has created opportunities that spark curiosity, build confidence, and connect students with people and experience that would otherwise not encounter. We've reached more than 750,000 students and teachers, created 29 award-winning curricula, mentored over 100 student ambassadors, and brought 15 Nobel laureates and 42 world leaders to Charlotte. Through our cutting-edge educational programs, students create our annual curriculum, meet global change makers, explore human dignity through the arts, and travel to places of global significance. This year, the ECHO student interns created a curriculum based on AI for humanity. As preparation for today's dialogue, you explored AI not just as a new technology, but as something that's already shaping how we learn, communicate, and understand the world. You study the good it can do, like breakthroughs in medicine and climate science, and the risks it can create, like misinformation, bias, and unequal access. At the center of your learning was one big question: what does the future of AI mean for humanity, and what role will we play in shaping it? We are excited to hear your questions, your ideas, and your vision today. Thank you for bringing your curiosity and your courage to this conversation. Before we begin, I'd like to give you an idea about how the questioning will work. Our ECHO student interns will ask the first questions. You'll see two mics on either side of the aisles in the auditorium. Please form lines behind these microphones to ask your questions. When it's your turn, step up to the mic, say your name and your grade, ask your question, and then and then listen to Mr. Collins' answer. At that point, you may return to your seat. You can go up the other side of the aisle and return to your seat. After the interns, we'll hear from representatives from each school, and then I'll open it up to all students to join us at the microphone. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Mrs. Julie McConnell, CMS Science Specialist and former head of science at Huff High School, and she has been a teacher of AP Bio, AP Chemistry for the past 28 years while teaching at Huff, as well as North Mecklenburg High School. In addition to being a first-rate beloved science teacher, Mrs. McConnell has traveled with the ECHO Foundation's Footsteps Global Initiative as co-chaperone to places such as Rwanda, Bosnia, Cuba, the Galapagos, and Western Europe. Mrs. McConnell loves teaching and enjoys remembering when a student said to her, "You make me feel smarter than I am." She has received many awards during her career, among those of which she is most proud of are the Dixon Award for Excellence in Teaching, presented by the ECHO Foundation, and the Cato Lifetime Achievement Teaching Award, presented by ASC. Over the years, her long-standing commitment to the humanitarian work of the ECHO Foundation has inspired hundreds of students. Her enthusiasm for travel and discovering new cultures, foreign lands, and meeting people of diverse backgrounds enriches the experience of every student she encounters. Please join me in welcoming Mrs. McConnell to the podium where she'll present the Art and Writing Awards.
Good morning, everybody. It is an honor to be here to present the 2026 ECHO Foundation Art and Writing Contest Awards. This year's contest invited students to engage thoughtfully with our theme, AI for Humanity. Across 4 categories, art, photography, essay and art, and poetry, students were challenged to imagine the future of AI in society and to reflect on what justice, responsibility, and stewardship should look like in an age of rapidly advancing technology. Central to this challenge was a powerful thought. The question is no longer what AI can do, but what we choose to do with it. The work being recognized today reflects creativity, insight, and ethical reflection. We are grateful to the several community leaders who agreed to do the difficult job of selecting our award winners from amongst the entries we received. And now it is my privilege to recognize the students whose work stood out for its originality, depth of thought, and alignment with the values that guide this program. At this time, I would like to ask our award recipients to come to the side of the stage. As each student is honored, their work or an excerpt of their work will be displayed on the screen. We are proud to celebrate their contributions and the meaningful perspectives they bring to this important conversation. Riley McNamee. Welcome. Liam Kinkin. Photography, blue ribbon. Liam? It's okay. Evan Wright is not here, but he won the honorable mention for essay. Next is Nanda Remish. Nanda. Jay Blair. Art, honorable mention. Jay, congratulations. Reagan Moore, blue ribbon for art. Congratulations. Joseph Berhe, honorable mention for poetry. Joseph. Thank you. And Vicky Teng, blue ribbon, poetry. Thank you. Congratulations.
Hi everyone, I'm Lucy Frost, a senior at Myers Park High School. This past summer I interned with the ECHO Foundation along with 7 others from 4 different high schools across the Charlotte area. As part of the curriculum team, we worked together for 9 weeks, 30 hours a week to develop the curriculum shared with teachers and all of you, AI for Humanity. My experience at ECHO was transformative, especially the community built and the new forms of collaboration we discovered while working as a team. During my time last summer, I had the opportunity to interview Mr. Eli Collins for our curriculum. While many of his insights stood out to me, this one was especially riveting. AI is like the Industrial Revolution, except 10 times bigger and 10 times faster. After hearing this thought at the interview and last night's welcome dinner, I've pondered a lot about how AI will develop into a modern system that will eventually become a new normal for everyone. As the Vice President of Product at Google DeepMind, Mr. Collins is a central figure in the future of AI as we know it. He leads Google's AI research and has launched initiatives such as Gemini, a front-leading AI system globally. He is known for his experience in software and hardware development for AI systems, as well as advanced analytics. He is a leader, guiding his team towards success and contributions to innovation within the AI community. As the ECHO Humanitarian of the Year, I hope we all notice how Mr. Collins contributes to ECHO's mission, to promote justice and inspire hope through education, service, and the development of leadership for a more humane world. When looking towards the end goal of building responsible and beneficial AI that is safe and ethical, Mr. Collins greatly participates in this mission. I and many others look forward to listening to his take on the future of AI in regards that it is safe and ethical. When looking towards the end goal of building responsible and beneficial AI that is safe and ethical, Mr. Collins greatly participates in this mission. I and many others look forward to his take on the future of AI in regards to its ethical and innovative uses and what it means as we continue to find our paths and develop into the leaders of tomorrow. On behalf of the ECHO Foundation, I am pleased to invite Mr. Collins to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Morning, everyone. Good to be here. I'm looking forward to hearing some of your questions about AI, but I'm happy to speak to anything. And I thought I'd actually just start with some brief remarks on my path here. When I was in your situation, I remember hearing speakers sitting in an auditorium, and you're hearing from someone who was there because they had achieved something sufficiently notable enough to be invited to one of these things. But I always had a hard time seeing myself in that person. I imagine they had this kind of relatively clear story of success. They just went from achievement to achievement, piling up accomplishments until they got an invitation. And I've gotten to know a number of successful people across industries and geographies, and I can tell you life is far messier. So what brought me to this podium this morning? Like many of you, I was actually born and raised in Charlotte. My dad taught math at Charlotte School for 50 years. My mom was a teacher and administrator at Central Piedmont Community College. So I have my roots here. I was really into art and computers. I definitely didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And younger colleagues often ask me for career advice, and I typically caveat it with, I am 47 and I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, which sounds kind of ridiculous because to some extent I have the kind of trappings of a grown up, a family and a house and kids and so on. But it's not what I imagined it would be. I figured at some point I'd just figure out what I want to do, and I was going to somehow get there, and I'd arrive kind of some sort of clarity of my position in life. But my experience has been that life doesn't work that way. So successful people often don't feel that certainty. Many of us have responsibilities and careers, but we're still actively figuring out what it is we want to do, who we want to be. And part of that, when people talk about life being about the journey and not the destination, that's almost a fancy way to say that. They're still figuring things out. And many successful people, in fact, never get to the destination. And I'll share a bit more about why that is. I eventually made peace with this kind of messiness and this journey by discovering a mental model that's helped me think about a career journey, but also a life that's kind of more continuous versus oriented around a destination. It came from a book by Clayton Christensen, and he's a professor, and he wrote a book called Innovator's Dilemma, which is about how technology companies compete and upend each other. And it became a huge book, and it's very successful. But he actually wrote another book because he realized when he would have his reunions for his business students, many of them were very successful but also very miserable. So he wrote another book that's not that popular, but I think is a better book called How Will You Measure Your Life? And in that book, he talks about the temptation of near-term wins, which we all feel, and the importance of aligning your resources, like your time, your energy, and your money on longer-term work. So things you won't see a return on for decades, like being a good friend, prioritizing your health, your faith, your family, raising good children, etc. And in hindsight, I realized that actually a lot of my success was due to having intrinsic motivation. And so intrinsic motivation is a desire or drive to engage in something for its own sake. And intrinsic motivation is powerful because it has, as a byproduct, it helps you prioritize these long-term things, which are actually important but kind of difficult to do in the day. And it's powerful, not just because it helps you prioritize these long-term things, but also because extrinsic motivation is quite powerful and attractive as well. And extrinsic motivation is doing things for kind of external rewards. So, focusing on grades versus what you're learning, or how much money you're earning versus how meaningful your work is. We're doing things because that's what people expect of you. And another thing I took away from the book is the difference between emergent and deliberate strategies. Deliberate strategies are when you have a goal and you work backwards from that goal to achieve something. So you might want to be a nurse or a doctor, teacher, mechanic, and whatnot, and then you work backwards and think of like what are all the skills and experiences and things you have to do to achieve that. As you've no doubt experienced, there's a lot of pressure to follow these kind of well-defined and predefined paths. And there's obviously something comforting in the certainty of knowing what you want to do and getting to spend your energy figuring out how to achieve that versus thinking about spending your time and energy figuring out what you want to do rather than kind of moving forward. But there's another strategy which is maybe less intuitive called an emergent strategy. So it acknowledges that it's okay not to know what you want to do. And not knowing what you want to do doesn't mean that you're not growing and learning and progressing. And the idea is that the best outcome available to you may not be what you originally had in mind. It may be a function of the skills you develop or the people you happen to meet, how technology ends up shaping the economy, or more importantly, what you learn when one of your deliberate strategies fails. And acknowledges that planning is difficult. So, so many of the jobs today didn't exist or look very different when I was in your seat. And something you may come to realize is that you yourself change, and so it's hard to predict what your future self will want. And to practice emergent strategy, you have to make peace with not knowing about how all these things will unfold. You have to think about what skills you want to develop, what experiences you want to have. Your life serves as experiments to figure out, help you learn what you want to do and who you want to be. And you might find that some of your most valuable experiences in hindsight are for doing things you had no idea that how they would relate to what you ultimately do. A personal example for me is wrestling. I was a nerd. I was super into computers and art, as I mentioned, which at least in the 80s and 90s were not what popular kids did. And I definitely was not, picked in PE. But my art teacher, who I loved, also happened to be the wrestling coach. And he convinced me somehow to join the wrestling team. I worked really hard. I sucked. I was not good. In wrestling, you wear a singlet, so you're like half naked as a teenager facing off against another person. And if you win or lose, it's completely on you. And I was mostly losing. And the reward, of course, for losing is the opportunity to do more hard work, spend more time on something that may not make you, may not have in my case, was not going to have a successful wrestling career, and keep going and trying again. But my experiences, like so many of my experiences of life subsequently, have been easier because I learned how to do something hard and keep going despite continuously not being successful. So I wasn't successful as a wrestler in terms of wins, certainly, and it was a distraction from my schoolwork. But it helped me learn to do hard things, which turns out to be one of the most important things to figure out how to do in life, and was infinitely more valuable than I imagined. Another example was my college major. I mentioned I liked art and computers. I went to film school to study animation in some kind of attempt to reconcile those two things to see if I could combine them. I love learning about film and animation, but the hypothesis failed. I discovered that I like these subjects separately. So I had to go from the film program to apply to art school, and then ultimately a year later I was applying to do math and computer science, and each of these where I went to college was a different school, and so you had to apply to college, you had to reapply to get in. You couldn't just change your major. So every year, I had some friends who knew the major, knew what they were doing, kind of linearly progressing. And every year I was the kid who was literally applying to college every year I was in college. I graduated on time, surprisingly. And I had a lot of great experiences. I learned a lot, but I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I thought about joining the Peace Corps, working at a startup, or going to grad school. I worked at a startup, and then we had the dot-com crash, which in the 90s was a big deal. Soon after, actually, months after that, was 9/11, and I was living in downtown New York City. So the world seemed pretty messed up, and I kept searching. So I applied to PhD programs, but I failed to get into any. I applied again a year later, fortunately got into a good school, but I dropped out after several years while I was on an internship in Silicon Valley. Subsequently, I was an engineer, and I helped start a company, eventually joined Google about 7 years ago. And I left grad school because I discovered what I really loved about computers was bringing new technology into existence. In each of these jobs, I was working to bring research and to market through products. And most recently, I've been working on how AI intersects with creativity in media and entertainment, kind of testing a hypothesis and reconnecting with an early passion. So, I'm well into my late 40s, and I'm still, testing hypotheses for how my career is going to work out. So as you can see, careers and personal development can be super messy, and that's okay. Sometimes the most messy things are the most beneficial. Failure can be one of the best sources of growth and learning, even though it obviously doesn't feel great. I'm glad I got my butt kicked in wrestling. I'm better for it. I regret, actually, in hindsight, having not tried and failed at more things. If I could go back again, I would do more of that. It's of course hard being different, but that's also can end up being one of your biggest sources of strengths. I wasn't the best artist or the best computer science, but it turns out there are not many people who are interested in both of those. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of value in learning how to do hard things, even if it's ultimately not what you end up doing. So bringing it back to here and now, I suspect 30 years ago, when I was in your chair, many of you will need to figure out what to do under a lot of uncertainty, actually more uncertainty than I faced in your same situation. You're going to graduate in a world that may feel messed up. You don't know what you're going to like, what's available to you, or what the world will look like. And so you have a lot of unknowns. And part of my message today, it's okay not to know what you want to do. In fact, it may be good, because the job you want may not exist. Technology may radically transform the economy. You may evolve as a person. It's hard to predict what your future self will want. And you can be lost, so to speak, and still have a plan. You can follow an emergent strategy and treat things as opportunities to learn new skills. And so many things I've realized skills are foundational. Thinking and writing, communicating, figuring out how to work with others, having difficult conversations. Like these are eternally valuable no matter what you do. So you can't go wrong learning these. And then also performing experiments, thinking about your life as performing experiments that test what you might want to do or what you might want to be. And there's also a lot of value in experiences that you definitely may not appreciate at the time. So I challenge you to think about what your equivalent, what wrestling was for me, what's the equivalent for you. And I'm pretty sure if I were to come back, at the same podium in a decade, I'd still say I don't know what I want to be, what I grew up, and I'm good with that. I actually don't really buy into the question anymore, and I don't really think about my life as having a concrete destination. I'm a lot more concerned with what I want to do versus what I want to be, and I definitely failed to appreciate that in the past. And hopefully, my experience here will help you appreciate some of the value of the messiness that is no doubt in front of you. So, thank you.
Thank you, Eli, for those wonderful words and thoughts and for sharing them with us and encouraging all of us to explore the endless possibilities that are available to us as we all continue to look towards the future. So we are going to now start the student dialogue. I'd like to invite forward make sure the microphones are all set up, my student interns to first line up behind the two microphones. And I think we're waiting for the other one to come over here, so we'll just give them a moment. We'll invite our student interns to line up between the two microphones on either side. And as they do that, and we get the second microphone set up, we'll also invite down the student representatives from each school to line up behind our student interns. And then we'll start with our first question. Let's give you all a minute. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with our first question from our students. Oh, the microphone's on.
Hi, my name is Ivy Dyer, and I'm a senior. And my question for you is, what do you think people most often misunderstand about AI's long-term impact on humanity? And what do you see being over or underemphasized in these kind of conversations?
All right. Well, thank you. So what do I see about... sorry, you can just repeat the question one more time. I was turning the mic on.
What do you think people most often misunderstand about AI's long-term impact on humanity?
Great question. So what do people most misunderstand about AI's impact on long-term humanity? I think the reality, so I would say even if you were to talk to a number of Nobel laureates in the space, people who are kind of deeply knowledgeable about the subject, they have very different predictions on the timelines for how the technology progresses and what it's capable of. So one thing, I see a lot of, and that's within kind of experts, let alone the kind of, broader analysts and kind of community of people. And so we love certainty, we love clean stories. It's very easy to be on one extreme of the perspective and that the technology is overhyped and it's not going to achieve much, or alternatively that it's going to change everything in some fundamental way and the future is going to be just completely radically different. The reality is always messy and in the middle. And so, but I think we're as humans, we're drawn to these kind of simplistic narratives. And the reality is even the experts don't exactly know how the AI technology itself, like how it's going to progress, let alone the second order effects of how it's going to be applied. Like it would have been really hard to predict, Uber and Airbnb, knowing that you had, the smartphone and touch interfaces and GPS. Like, at some point you get a lot of technologies that just combine together in interesting ways. So it's very difficult to predict. So I think the thing I think most people get wrong is trying to figure out, come up with some kind of false level of precision, when in reality there's going to be, a ton of uncertainty. So that's kind of the first thought. And then the second is, the technology is progressing exponentially. So it means it's doubling, roughly every year or so in terms of progress. And it's really hard for us as people to understand exponentials, just because so few things in life work on exponentials. And so if you think of like the curve of progress, it's just incredibly steep right now. And so it's the other mistake I think a lot of us is, not underestimating an exponential, like not understanding how quickly things are improving. Because, if you look at it day to day or week to week, especially in the AI community, it can sometimes feel slow. But if you zoom out, just the rate of progress is pretty wild. And so I think it's it will be, some of us feel we're sleepwalking a bit, because I think it's going to be a much bigger deal. But it's going to take, 5 years to play out, but it's going to play out in a pretty transformative way. And I think that, at least by our day-to-day actions, we don't always appreciate that.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alex Mao, and I'm a senior at Providence Day School. So my question was, how concerned do you think we should be about AI making black box decisions or any other kind of unprecedented decision?
Yeah, great question. So a black box decision, just for folks who are unaware, is a decision when you can't introspect and understand necessarily reverse engineer the logic that went into that decision. And this is actually an issue in previous roles I already faced, where a lot of traditional machine learning, kind of the precursor to like modern AI, was done by algorithms where it might predict your credit score based on a bunch of data. And it's, and often in those algorithms, we wouldn't necessarily know why person A versus person B got, a given credit score. And obviously there are real, ramifications for like, what kind of loan or house you can get, et cetera. Your credit score impacts a lot of things. And so so even pre the current generation of AI, we've had to think through like, how do we want to deal with things like credit score predictions where we don't really understand the credit score prediction, and what sorts of signals should we use? So one interesting study we had done is that like someone's phone battery was actually like a great predictor of their credit score, like how charged someone kept their phone. Now, of course, you don't want to give someone a house based on like how good they are keeping their phone charged, even though you would actually be quite successful as an insurance company using that data. So I think you have to be, anytime you have a component that is capable of making like a black box decision like this, you have to be really careful around like what data so even though it's a black box, like it's a black box operating on data, what data it's operating on, so you have to be really mindful of all of the inputs to that black box. And then you also have to obviously be mindful about how you evaluate the results of that black box. So in the case of like credit scores, we often will in industry will check those against, for example, bias. So for example, if the black box makes a bunch of decisions, you then go check that decision against other criteria that you care about. So you might believe that the black box is making smart decisions, but you still want to have, and you might monitor what data is being used to make those decisions, but it's also important that you're, monitoring the outputs of those decisions to detect for, things like fairness. So I think, ultimately, because of the nature of the technology, there are going to be more components that are operating in a black box way. Like if you look at autonomous vehicles, more and more of how the vehicle is being driven is being done in a black box way, but we're also getting a lot better in terms of understanding and like evaluating the outputs of those black boxes. And so I think that's I'm not too worried about it because that's an area, it's something we've been looking at for 20, 30 years. But I definitely think it's there are definitely potentially issues with it, and I mean we've seen that before.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tara Alley, and I'm a sophomore. And my question is, what skills do you think matter most for students with such an AI-driven future?
What skills, you said protect?
Matter most for
Oh,
students.
matter most. Yeah, I mentioned this just kind of briefly in my remarks. I think a lot of and this is not new, like technology has been changing jobs for a long time. So, in the 1800s, 80% of the population worked in agriculture. It was 40-something% in the 1900s. Now it's below 2%. So, I think one of the things that's new about it, technology changing the work we do that's been the story of humanity. What's I think new with AI is the speed at which that change might happen might be a lot faster than they previously experienced. But if you look at like a lot of the kind of, as I was talking about, so many of the skills are pretty fundamental skills. So like thinking, reasoning, communicating, working with others. Like my experience has been like so much of like school and work is actually a kind of mechanism to learn some of these more like foundational skills. And I think that foundational skills are still relevant. So I mean, like, learning, if you think about like learning math and like learning a logical thought process, or like studying things that came before you and analyzing, hey, wow, like I spend a lot of time, you would think, technologists working on AI in the future, you'd be surprised how many of us are history nerds. We spend actually a lot of time looking backwards, not just while we're kind of building forwards. And so I think a lot of the those core skills are relevant. And so I think I don't know that AI necessarily changes the core skill set. What I would say is that I think it's we're going to go into a period of time where people who have agency and who are self-directed have a much greater advantage than people who don't. So I think that for kind of previous decades, you could just kind of fit into the system and plug along and be quite successful. Whereas now I see there's a lot more rewards for like people who have agency and kind of make their own decisions. And so I think that's it's almost more of a behavioral trait that matters more than the core skills, which I think are largely the same.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Zach. My question is, what steps is DeepMind taking to make AI more sustainable, and what's your take on the long-term environmental impact of AI?
Yeah, a great question. It's definitely an area that we spend a lot of energy and do study a lot. One I would say is we made. I think there's two ways to look at it. So one is the sustainability of AI development itself. So if you look at like the data centers and power and cooling and water, et cetera, all of the kind of inputs to building AI, you can look at the like sustainability of that. So we can briefly talk a little bit about that. The other is really importantly is what AI will do for sustainability. So much of, for example, if you were to ask my boss Demis, like what's the most positive impact AI will have, it's progressing science. So if you think of like the work we've done with AlphaFold and trying to find diseases, we're also doing a lot of work with AI and material science. And so AI is being used to basically try to define significantly better battery chemistries. So for example, as you can imagine, planes that can, right now we have electric cars, we don't have electric planes, but you can imagine with better battery chemistry, you can have things like electric planes. So there's a lot of work being done to apply AI to sustainability itself. And then there are also these second order effects where the development, just a huge build out of data centers and infrastructure is creating a ton of investment in energy. And so historically, we had been shutting down nuclear plants and not refurbishing them. And now we and others are building a ton of clean energy just because of the growing demand. And so I think that's also a big component of like how sustainability is going to be impacted. But maybe I imagine your question was more on the first part. But so one is we have to do a ton of efficiency to improve AI. So if AI is going to be rapidly deployed, so we're now at the point where, like if you think of water, using Gemini or ChatGPT or any kind of chat, any of the big chatbots at this point, is about similar to like watching Netflix, from kind of a water and electricity consumption. So we've been doing a ton of work to make AI more efficient, partly out of necessity, just because it was, in 2019, just using a chatbot was like using a supercomputer. Even at Google, we only made the project that became Lambda. We were only able to make it available to like 10,000, 20,000 people. It was just too computationally expensive. Now chatbots are accessible to billions of people. So we figured out how to drive down the cost quite a bit. And the other thing we're doing is completely revisiting how we build data centers. And so at the most extreme example, we have a program to build data centers in space where the sun and solar are incredibly abundant. That's our probably our most advanced work going on, and we and others are now starting to do that. But more closer at home, we're also looking at new data center designs, where rather than putting a large box, like taking a huge part of Texas and leveling it and putting a lot of turbine engines and a power plant, basically putting a data center next to a power plant, we're looking at basically trailers in remote regions that are completely off the grid, operating on solar. And so the data centers that you see in the next 3 years will look radically different than what you typically see as a data center today. So I think that's how the infrastructure is going to get built. And all of this, to be clear, I mean, a big part of it comes from a true desire to be sustainable, but there's also just a massive if you want to make this technology economical and scalable, and you have to think differently about how you build it. So that's what we're doing.
Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Collins. My name is Bargov, and I'm a sophomore at Charlotte-Mecklenburg High School. As we know, AI has shaped the education system, especially for students, which made learning a lot easier. However, it causes a dependency for AI, which can hinder the students' natural thinking ability. So my question to you is, how can we implement AI in a way that doesn't hinder the students' natural thinking capability?
It's a great question. It's a personal one for me because my dad, so I mentioned my dad was a high school math teacher. And in like the early 90s, Texas Instruments came out with and he taught geometry and calculus. In the early 90s, Texas Instruments came out with a graphing calculator. And so what would have been like an hour or two of homework for a geometry or calculus teacher, you could literally just put in your calculator and be done in 5 minutes. And he and a bunch of other teachers worked with Texas Instruments to completely redo the curriculum for calculus, because the graphing calculator basically, made obsoleted the curriculum overnight. And now we have a similar situation with AI, except unlike the graphing calculator, which was kind of easy to control and not everyone takes geometry and calculus, AI, everyone writes essays, right? AI is like much more accessible. And it's not obviously like, outsourcing your writing is not new. People were paying, people and other people to write their essays, but obviously technology made it a lot higher quality and a lot more accessible and a lot cheaper. And so now it's obviously it's a real issue, and I think it's exposed a lot of kind of issues in the pedagogy of how we teach things. And so one of the challenges we have is that technology is here and it's rapidly evolving, and it takes time. Just redoing the calculus curriculum took years. A lot of the other curriculum that we're looking at hasn't been changed in a century. And so I think, we're in this place where people are looking at the pedagogy. Actually, just yesterday, Google announced that we're providing free training for every K-12 teacher in the country, so 6 million teachers plus everyone in higher ed to get trained on AI for free, because we see the need to kind of educate everyone on the technology and what's capable, and to think through how to incorporate it. But that will even things like that will still take time. So I think it's to some extent incumbent, as you were kind of the generation that's going through, and it will not have the new pedagogy, but does have the tools. And so you kind of have to think through and make personal decisions around like what's a smart way to use AI. And often I'll hear people talk about using AI as a binary thing, and it's not. I mean, it's the same with any other piece of technology where you could when the internet came out, people would post essays and they would just grab someone else's essay and they would wordsmith it. And so technology has always given you a way to an easy path out. But obviously that's not, and you can have AI write an essay, but there are ways to use AI in a way like, whether it's learning mode or having it, you writing the essay and then having it analyze and critique things in ways that are constructive. And so, I mentioned personal agency, and ultimately, until the pedagogy gets updated, it's really going to be up to like you all as individuals to choose how you use it and make smart choices. And, ultimately it's, it's kind of in your best interest to do so. But I know that's obviously, it's hard when, you have all the pressures that you do.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Hello. Hello, I'm Kaden Swedeen I'm a sophomore at North Mech High School. Artificial intelligence has begun to surround us everywhere in art, thinking, work, entertainment, and just everything. But we haven't been given the option to opt out of it. These changes are being forced on us without us having a say, while the greed of humanity pushes AI into harmful laws that benefit the powerful. How can we, as regular people, make the role of AI in our lives and future our choice?
Yeah, that's a great. So the question was, AI is basically getting rapidly deployed, and in ways that we often don't have a lot of control over, and that it's getting embedded in kind of products and services that we use, or education to the previous example, and how do we kind of have control and autonomy over it? I think one of the things to understand about AI is it's a general purpose technology, and so just like any other general purpose technology, it's gonna it's gonna be widely deployed. So if you think of like phones or laptops, or and so I think there, to some extent, we as individuals, we don't have a ton of autonomy over technical generations happen, and then largely if you look at how many people have a cell phone, I suspect it's the majority of this room, right? So it's like, to some extent, I think it is going to be widely adopted because it's a general purpose technology. But I think there's kind of a bit similar to the previous example. I think we as a society are still figuring out, and as individuals, but also as organizations, where and how we want to use AI. Education being a good example is that it's not. I don't view it as using AI or not, but there's a kind of good ways to use things and bad ways to do things. In the same way that like social media can be powerful and great, and social media can be disastrous and horrible. And it's not whether social media is good or bad; it's how you use social media. And I think AI is no different. And so I think. But all of this, to some extent, is going to be predicated on understanding, how is it being used, why is it being used, and then, being involved, whether it's on a personal level, like deciding how, or, if and how you want to use it in your own in learning, but also like at a broader, at a broader level, like how is AI going to be deployed in the school, for example. It's super important that people understand the technology, kind of in the same way that people who are building models to do credit scoring really need to understand all of the inputs to the credit scoring and how the credit scoring, like you need to be an expert on credit scoring even if you're using a black box for credit scoring, and the same is true with AI. Like you need to be an expert in like education and learning if you're using AI in learning. It's not a shortcut.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hello, my name is Rihanna Smart, and I'm a 10th grader at Harding University High School. And my question to you is, do you consider AI to be more helpful to us or more harmful?
Yeah, I think the way I think about this is there's like any long-term general purpose technology, you're thinking about this question over time. So I think, if we look at the development over, 5-10 years, et cetera, what do we think, what's the expected impact? And kind of what I referenced in the first question is like you can easily come up with extreme examples of both good and bad. So you can, the extreme positive example is like radical abundance. The extreme negative example is AI, kills it, the Terminator, AI kind of kills us all. Obviously, like given my role and what I do, like the mission of DeepMind where I work is to build AI responsibly to benefit humanity. And so kind of implicit in that is like we think humans are actually, like whether AI is good or bad is a function of the values and how the people who are kind of doing how the people are choosing to do the work. So for example, we don't do any projects on weapons. So for example, like we don't, there are many people who would love to use AI for weapons development. There's a lot of that work going on. That's something we choose not to participate in because we think the risk reward is not right for that. On the other hand, we built AlphaFold, which solved a grand challenge in biology, got my boss a Nobel Prize, and we're now have cancer drugs in development built on this technology through a company we started that's what has the mission of solving disease. And if that works out, that will be massively valuable. So I would say, with technology, we don't know. It's tough to predict. It's tough to predict the future. But what we can do is make sure, the values that we have and how we invest are in accordance in those values, and that we will see a more. Our belief is that we'll see it'll be incredibly positive. But also, we have 5,000 people and billions of dollars being deployed at trying on those kind of positive outcomes. And so, one of the things we do is not just with our own work, but with other work, is kind of advocate for effectively what's the positive investment so that we can ensure it's positive versus a negative outcome.
All right, thank you.
Hello, my name is Destiny Dennis, and I'm a senior at West Mecklenburg High School. And I wanted to know, regarding AI in software development, do you think it's wise for students that want to pursue computer science in college? Do you think it's still wise for them to do that and maybe just stay away from software engineering where AI has more of a risk to take over? Or do you think it's more worth it to pursue an AI development degree or certificate?
Yeah, good question. And and again, this is one where I think you could find even very knowledgeable people would give you differing opinions. My opinion is it's still very valid. I think I studied computer science both in high school and in college, despite kind of being all over the place, as I mentioned. And I think you learn a lot of fundamental. I think studying computer science is kind of a foundationally valuable thing to do. I think also, so to be clear, AI is definitely impacting software engineering. If you just in the last, say, 3 to 4 weeks, everyone in San Francisco has been freaking out because agents have gotten so good that they can, so many software developers are no longer writing code. So they were using AI for years, to help check code or fix bugs. They were, using AI as a tool, but the models have gotten so good in literally only in the last month, where many of them are just supervising the model, and they're going from writing the code themselves to supervising effectively agents that are writing code and reviewing their work and effectively directing it as opposed to writing code. And some of the people are incredibly excited by this and are incredibly productive in doing sorts of things they couldn't do before. Other people are freaked out because it's a very big change in the way they're working. And so, and so you might see, it's unclear, even within people in software, it's unclear if employment will go down. The trajectory of computer programming has been to make it easier and more accessible year after year after year. And yet the number of software engineers keeps going up because it turns out the market for software is quite large. There's just more and more software that the world needs. And so, despite all of the productivity improvements and ease of use, we've always employed more people. That may change some with AI, but I think I'm actually skeptical. I think even the people using the systems, if you think of the biologists using AlphaFold or the software engineering using AI agents, they have to understand the fundamentals of biology or software engineering or if you're, for example, doing credit scores and you're building a black box ML model for credit scoring, you really want to understand machine learning, even if you're, operating on a black box. I think the fundamental understanding, if it were me, every high school student would take computer science just because technology is so pervasive and so ingrained in, pretty soon, there might only be self-driving cars in 10 years. AI is getting deployed as a general purpose technology. It's going to get deployed everywhere, just like the internet has. Understanding how technology works is, I think important is going to be increasingly important just to understanding how the world functions. And so, in the same reason, I'm not an economist, but I'm really glad I have a rudimentary understanding of economics. I think having a high school level understanding of computer science would be unquestionably valuable. And then even at a college level, I think there's still going to be a large the nature of how software gets built is going to change. But the people building the software in the future are still going to be the people who understand the fundamentals, because at the end of the day, there are going to need people who understand how these systems work and correct the agents, and in the same way that a power plant maybe needs 1/100th of the people it did in the past, but the people who are running nuclear power plants are experts in nuclear energy, and I think you'll continue to need that expertise. And in areas where we don't, I actually think the fundamental understanding of technology is beneficial. Even if you study software engineering, computer science, and you end up not being a software engineer, I think it's not a bad foundation.
Thank you.
My name is Ayana Squirewell from Mallory Creek High School. I'm a senior. My question is, do you guys provide internships for students wanting to be software engineers?
Yeah, Google and pretty much every large tech company in the Valley has internship programs. So
for seniors?
I don't know. I was gonna say not most of I think they're almost all college programs. So yeah, unfortunately not for high school students.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Rico Hall. I'm a freshman at West Mecklenburg High School. My question is, how do you think the economy is going to respond with AI improving over the years?
How the economy is going to respond with AI kind of improving?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's this is another area where I'm on a panel. The University of Chicago has a survey where they have a lot of AI domain experts and a lot of economists and a lot of forecasters, and each of us every month gets effectively a questionnaire, and a lot of them are kind of predicting what the economy will look like, and the way those predictions are structured is there's normally kind of three scenarios where there's a slow progression of AI, a kind of a moderate progression of AI, and a rapid progression of AI. And then for each of those scenarios, we effectively try to kind of estimate what the impact will be. So one I would say is part of the reason we're doing these surveys is there's a ton, even among experts, there's a ton of uncertainty. I tend to be more in the moderate progression camp, where I think it's going to have a pretty significant impact on the economy. But I think it's going to be tempered by the fact that technology just takes time to deploy. There's so many human elements to the economy that it just takes time for things to change. So I think there are going to be some areas where AI is going to massively grow the economy. You can already see this with, for example, energy and data centers and memory prices. There's certain parts of the economy that are just booming right now because of AI. And then there are other areas, where recently, people will look at certain parts of industries as being potentially disrupted by AI, and you can imagine parts of the economy going away. I think it's going to net out as economic growth, because generally the history of technology is that technology improves productivity improves gross domestic product, or how much kind of economic impact every person can have. And so I think it's going to be, I think you're going to see a ton of progress and a lot of economic growth, but I also think it's going to be really bumpy, just as previous kind of transitions were.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Benjamin Alligator. I'm a senior at Charlotte Country Day School. And you mentioned things like exponential growth. I guess my question is, should we be working towards AGI, or should we more focus on the use of hyper-specialized versions of AI in specific fields? And then my second part to that is, if so, should we have some sort of international governing body to regulate that sort of thing, or should you just let it loose?
Yeah. On the first question on AGI, the opportunity is so big that we and others are working on both AGI as well as more specialized systems. And AGI is one of those things that even among experts is not well defined, but you can think of AGI as AI that's effectively capable of the cognitive capabilities of most people. That's kind of similar to a mean or mode human. And a lot of that is it's not like if you look at these labs, it's not even necessarily like there's an AGI program. It's just advancing kind of how the models get built and scaled up. You're naturally getting to AGI even without trying to progress, just by making things kind of better. And so I think that's inevitable. Even if we didn't pursue it, China and other countries would pursue it. So I don't think there's a way to prevent or stop AGI. Even if we wanted to, it would just come from somewhere else, and we wouldn't understand it as well. So that would not be a good outcome. On the international body part, we're trying to do that at the international level for some parts of the world. Like China is obviously difficult to collaborate with that in a sense, but we do a ton of work across the Western world, and we actually just last week had an AI summit in India where every top AI leader got together with the Prime Minister of India, who kind of hosted everyone, and a lot of that is figuring out how to align on safety goals and safety work, and effectively kind of how to do kind of cross-country AI governance. So that's something we have and are actively working on, and we think is important. So yeah, that's. I think and I think you're only going to see, as the technology progresses, you're only going to see more of that.
Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Collins. I'm Rayvant Neelakantham. I'm a sophomore at Valentine Ridge High School. And as you know, DeepMind produces so many AI research innovations. And my question to you is, how does DeepMind go from the development phase to finally deciding to deploy this amazing softwares to billions of people around the world? How do you know that it's ready? And
yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that I've noticed, just over the 25 years plus that I've been working, is the time cycle between something being kind of a research idea, like in a paper, and getting deployed and being accessible to people has gotten a lot faster. Mm-hmm. So that 20 years ago was things would sit in the lab for a long time, and then successfully, not just with AI but any technology, we've gotten a lot. We've just gotten a lot better at kind of bringing research to life, and that's true both for software and computers, but also true for vaccines. So mRNA means we can create a COVID vaccine in 6 months from scratch, where that used to be a 2 to 3 year process. So in general, I would say as a scientific community, people are working to speed up the process of how quickly we can create ideas and get them deployed as soon as we can. But your question also is how do you know that they're ready? And that's really, I think, kind of an application. That we don't. It's hard to think about readiness purely at the technical level, because if you think about the AI that's in a self-driving car versus the AI that's in an API for a developer to experiment with, have obviously a much higher bar. So the AI that goes in a Waymo obviously gets a lot more rigorous testing and development than an experimental AI that's a developer API that's for kind of experimental purposes. So we look really heavily on what the how the technology gets deployed, and then that kind of factors into the readiness. For kind of general purpose AI like Gemini that you might experience in a chatbot, we have a whole program that's focused on particular safety risks, and that we evaluate any model that goes into Gemini has to effectively pass a set of tests. And we have an internal team that performs those tests, but we also work with a number of external organizations who also do that testing on our models before we release them, as kind of an extra check and balance in case there's a problem in our process.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Collins. My name is Jesus Herrera Lopez, and I represent Cochran Collegiate Academy, and I'm a junior. My question to you is that as the internet and AI proceeds to advance, how would we be able to differentiate media such as videos and pictures and threads from human verified sources and AI gathered information sources?
Yeah, great question. We were just chatting about that before we came on stage, and one of the students was trying to convince their mother that one of their videos they were watching was AI generated, and the mom was like, "No way, that's real." And of course, it's AI generated. So that's I would say that is like a here and now problem. In terms of like one of the areas, so we talked about our mission, building AI responsibly to benefit humanity. One of the things that we do we don't think of, part of being responsible is deployment, kind of the previous questions, the testing and how we go deploy that. But part of it being responsible is also how we build the AI. So for example, our video generation models, we developed a technology called SynthID, and we modify all of the output of our AI models so that we can detect that our model created the output. So if you ask Gemini to write an essay, we can tell that essay was generated with Gemini, even if you just send us a text, because we've changed the probability of like the way the models work is that they're effectively generating words with a certain probability distribution. And we can adjust that distribution in very subtle ways so that we can detect, even though you just see a bunch of text, we can actually detect that probability distribution. So whether it's a video or an image or text, we have technology so that we can detect what we generate. And part of that is we're working with the ecosystem to scale that work so that everyone, this watermarking, we've open sourced it, and so it's not just our models that are watermarking. We'd like to have every model watermark its outputs. But then we're also working on scalable ways to detect. So you can use Gemini yourself to actually tell if something, you can ask it if this AI video is generated or not. But ideally, the platforms would integrate this technology so that if you're on TikTok and you're scrolling, something pops up where it's like detected synthetic content in it, and then there's some kind of notification or like you're notified of that. But I would say misinformation is actually not a technology problem. Like that's something we combat misinformation at Google. That's a huge problem, on the internet, and something we've been facing, but even before AI. And one of the biggest challenges we have with misinformation is actually people taking like real images in video and then posting them out of context. So it might be like, a real photo from a war in one part of the world, and then posting about that as if it's a problem in another part of the world. And so we have a whole team that does what's called information integrity. And so it's one of the areas where we think AI can be beneficial. So we can say it's still too expensive to practically deploy it, but you can imagine Twitter or X or YouTube or whatnot saying, hey, like this image is real, but it's actually not it's actually different than what the post. It's actually not an image of Pakistan. It's an image of this. And so you can imagine using AI effectively to like real-time fact check your screen, and you can imagine phones of the future doing that. And so you have like a layer that's, you're seeing what you see, but you have another layer that's effectively like fact checking everything, because the reality today is you can't, whether it's not even with independent of AI, you certainly can't trust information on the internet. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is William, and I'm a sophomore at Ballantyne Ridge. My question is, do you think AI will eventually make everything automated to the point where we are not needed to like run the world basically, and everything is just, we rely on AI to exist?
Yeah, the most extreme example on AI would be, a world where everything is completely automated, and its life is just pure leisure time. And there, by the way, when the first and second industrial revolution happened, people had predicted a 2-day work week, and so this concept has come up before. I'm skeptical. The percentage of the working population has been around 60%, 60 to 65% for like 100 years. I think there's something kind of innate into humans in terms of work, and we're pretty good at creating new jobs. I mean, like social media influence, if you look at like what are the top jobs that people want today, they were like jobs that didn't even exist that years ago. So I think we're going to continue to create new jobs and have a lot of employment. The other if you think about, I mentioned kind of history and looking backwards, if you look at like the first industrial revolution, which was kind of like biopower, like humans and animals largely getting replaced by steam power and ultimately other forms of energy. But there's a time when all effectively physical labor was done by animals or humans, and then steam power and subsequently other technology came along. but if you were to, and so if you were to talk to someone from, the 1800s, today they would just see amazing amounts of mechanical. They would see like tractors and farms and factories, and they would say, "Wow, there's like," they would just be amazed at how much, technical automation there is on building things. But there's still a huge amount of human labor. Like, it's not like fortunately, like, kids don't work anymore, and we don't have 8 kids because we're worried about half of them dying and the other half, supporting, working on the farm. But there's still a lot of labor, like physical labor. And so I think the same will be true with AI and cognition. So like, even as AI is able to do, to automate certain tasks, like if you think of translation, AI is far better at translation already today than the vast majority of professional translators. But there's still quite a few professional translators. So I don't think I think even if you see a future where there's a ton of automation being done by AI, I still think you're going to see. I think you'll still see a ton of human labor, just as we continue to see a lot of 8 billion people on the planet with a lot of human labor, despite the fact that like we're 150 years past the Industrial Revolution. So,
thank you.
But yeah, the jobs will look very different.
Thank
you. Good morning, Mr. Collins. My name is Amaya, and I'm one of the representatives at Philip O'Berry Academy of Technology, and I'm also a freshman. I noticed that you talked a lot about how, not a lot, but you talked a little bit about how water is used to cool down generators of AI. And my question for you is, where is that water being provided, and is it reusable?
Yeah, I would say, so we've gotten to the point where it's about like serving a query on Gemini or Chatbot is about 1 teaspoon of water. But obviously, if you have billions of people and billions of queries, that adds up. The data center, the water is highly dependent on the data center. So there's some data centers that are built next to hydro power. Like hydroelectric is one of the best, cleanest data like energy sources, and it's also great to be close to a water supply. There are other data centers that are in the desert. And they run completely on recycled water, and so I would say it's really different depending on where in the world you deploy the data center. But yeah, in general, all of the beauty of the data centers is that like most of the water, especially that's used for cooling, we're recycling it and we're putting it, it's going to the roof and then it's cooling off and then it's getting recycled back into the machines, and it's kind of in a closed loop. So it's not water is not even in the top 5 things we worry about. Like we've gotten water consumption down really low. We're really good at reusing water. Electricity, like energy and electricity, is a way bigger concern than water for us right now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Collins. My name is Teray Bridges at Harding University High School, and I'm a junior. And my question is, how do you feel about students completing assignments utilizing AI, and how do you feel about AI affecting people's jobs?
Yeah, in terms of using AI for assignments, I think it really depends on what you're doing. And so actually yesterday, Stephanie, who started the Echo Foundation, asked me, did I use AI to write my remarks? And she's like, I don't think you did. And I'm like, I didn't. And part of it is because for me, writing is thinking. And so to use AI to write it would have been to outsource my thinking, but I actually need to me, the goal isn't actually to write, it's to organize my thoughts. So writing is just the way that, it's just the mechanism. I often write things that I never, just to throw away, because it's my kind of process for thinking. But there are other examples where I'll use AI for writing. So I might have, huge, there's a lot more that I want to read than I actually have time to read. So I might use AI to summarize, to go look at a 50-page, report and summarize it down to half a beat, and then to go do some research and so on. And then I'll only look at the output of that. And that's something where AI did all the writing and all the reading. And I was never going to do that reading and writing. And it was super useful to have AI. So I think it's important not to think through, do you use AI for writing? There are bad ways to use AI for writing. There are good ways to use AI for writing. I think you have to really look at what's the job you're trying to do, and then is AI kind of appropriate for how to do it. And understandably, that's difficult because the technology is progressing quickly. It's difficult to know what it's good at, it's good or bad at. And we have all these kind of well-defined ways of working. So I would say like it's easiest to kind of keep working, the way you are. And so where I would suggest starting is like experimenting it. I would feel less urgency about like using AI productively, but more using AI with the intent to like understand what it's capable of, see how it's progressing, more than like use AI to get your work done. There might be cases where if you're advanced, that's useful, but I think it's actually far more interesting now to like just to try to understand the technology than to use it. And so some of the most challenges of using it are people using it but not understanding it, which is kind of like the worst of both worlds. I think your second question was on jobs. I definitely think, like I said, there was a time when 80-something% of the U.S. worked in agriculture. That's now 2%. If you think about AI being an equivalent of like what the Industrial Revolution was for, that there certainly be like the landscape of what jobs there are will change. I think so. It definitely won't be smooth sailing, but I'm also optimistic because like we evolved as hunter-gatherers, and like yet we mostly successfully exist in kind of modern civilization. So like despite our wiring is we evolved in a far different environment. So we're pretty. Humans have a ton of ingenuity. We're pretty adaptable, and so we've gone through these kinds of transitions before, and successfully. So I'm kind of optimistic about that. And then if you were to look back, say 100 years ago or 200 years ago, most people would rather be alive today than 100 or 2 years ago. So ultimately, the Industrial Revolution was pretty good. In terms of like, it's nice to have vaccines, it's nice to not have child labor, et cetera. And so I think we'll similar, but it was incredibly bumpy. And so I think that this will be similar, and that we'll look back and it'll be positive, but it'll be bumpy. And we have, part of the challenge will be how we manage that transition.
Yes,
so
sir.
I think it's inevitable, but it's, and I think it's ultimately positive, but I also don't want to, mislead you in that it won't be disruptive, because I think it will be.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Collins. My name is Fiorella Ordonis, and I'm a freshman at Philip O'Berry Academy of Technology. My question is, since AI was initially created to help humans how to think, solve, and understand problems, will the way it is used today, such as generating unnecessary images and videos, affect the way AI works?
So does generating image and videos affect the way AI works, is the question?
Yeah.
To give you an example, just for context, when large language models started, they were primarily text to text. So they were trained on textual data and produced textual output. But the techniques that allowed AI models to transform text to text, it turns out like those techniques work across any modality. So speech, you've probably all, with 3 seconds of audio, AI can now clone a voice. You can do audio to audio, you can do image to video, image to image, video to video, or you can do text to video, and so on. And so the fundamental techniques apply across all modalities. And then furthermore, what we found is that typically having access to the modalities actually helps. So like, video data actually helps you do a better job with text. So for example, watching a YouTube video and understanding, like there's some that you can read text about physics, but actually having videos about physics will help you produce better textual output of physics as well. So it shouldn't be too surprising, because humans work the same way. So we move in 3D space, and a lot of the learning that we do with a lot of senses kind of effectively, helps us get smarter in any one sense. And the same is true with AI. So our general sense is that all of these modalities, just as they help humans and humans leverage one modality across another, our sense is AI is doing that as well. And so I think it seems to be more kind of on the path to progression. But maybe in the question, you brought up like the images and video, and I think that's not to say that you can't have like problematic outputs in AI. You definitely can, and it's not to also say that the problematic outputs are constrained to image and video. You can have problematic outputs in text. Like we've had lots of the first product that we ever launched with generative AI at scale was Google Translate, which has a billion users and is a great product. But I would occasionally get these escalations. This is back like in 2019, where some like world leader would be offended, or someone would be offended because Google Translate would like mess up the pronouns, or it would like say something bad about the Pope, and then people would get really angry with Google and they'll say, "Oh my gosh, like why are you saying this like horrible thing about the Pope?" And it was because they would be translating something from Italian to some like low, relatively unpopular language where like the training data and the quality wasn't particularly good, and so the model was making up, was hallucinating text that was incorrect. Of course, people didn't, in 2019, they didn't even know what generative AI was. It wasn't even something they talked about. They just assumed some programmer at Google was like demeaning the Pope. So, so to be clear, like there's there's this problem called alignment, which is like getting the AI outputs to align to the kind of policies and the sorts of responses that you want. And that's a hard research problem that we're still working on. But that problem exists across all modalities. So I think, it's, this gets a little bit to the question about disinformation. So I think you have to, we're doing a lot of work to try to align the model outputs better to what like the user intends. Like you're not trying to insult the Pope when you're translating something, but also really thinking through how the technology gets deployed so that AI is actually part of the solution rather than part of the problem. So you can imagine a version of your phone that like spots synthetic content and like almost acts as a second screen to understand and challenge like what you're seeing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Good morning. My name is DJ Anderson from Harding University High School, and I would like to ask, what is your message to the teachers that are against AI? And I also want to ask, how far do you envision AI will really take off in the near future?
Yeah, I love that question, by the way. I talked a little bit about my dad in calculus, and it's funny, when I went to college, the calculus at NYU was using the old curriculum with a whiteboard, and they disallowed graphing calculators. And there was this kind of like the French and European school of math that like hated graphing, even in college and in advanced math, like would not include graphing calculators. And there's much of the world that eventually adopted it. And I thought that was good. I thought it was interesting to see that like, the math community had been split amongst the people who were pro-graphing calculators and pro-redoing the curriculum and people who didn't want to change the way math had been done. And it wasn't like and for me, it wasn't a black and white, one approach is better, than the other. And I think, and again, that graphing calculators are like baby food compared to what we're seeing with AI. So I think we're going to continue to see like a diversity of opinions and approaches in terms of like how technology should impact the pedagogy, like how we teach and learn. I think that's good. I think that's healthy. Like it would bother me if everyone, agreed on the right way. I think we need more experimentation and intellectual diversity in how students, how we teach and learn. We've been too long in the factory model. So for me, if a teacher is, interested in, thinking through how, kind of creatively how people should teach and learn. If it's anti-AI, that's not necessarily problematic. But I think like continuing to stick with the factory model of education is problematic. So I think as long as it's kind of trying to advance education forward, that's a good thing. I think it's hard. I suspect though that very few teachers are actually anti-AI per se. They're probably anti the way AI is being applied, like they're anti-cheating or they're anti-kids turning their brains off and not actually, like not thinking, not writing themselves to think, but like, outsourcing their thinking. And that I think you would find most people, even in the AI community, are like highly aligned with those teachers, because we all didn't get to where, all the people building AI did not get to where we got by, we didn't have AI to outsource our papers, but there were kids who bought the crib notes and had other people write their essays, and mostly that's not the people who are building AI largely didn't do that. And so I think from that perspective we're probably aligned.
I also have a side question. Do you feel like AI is gonna get to like Iron Man, like in that kind of way?
Yeah, it's a good one. There definitely, so like I said, we don't work on military technology directly, but there are definitely companies who are who are building exoskeletons and embedding AI in them. And so I would say like you will see, probably not like the movie, but you'll see like the modern equivalent. You will see kind of versions of that for sure in the next 5 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Jemiah Copper. I am a senior at Harding University High School. And my question is, as AI systems like Gemini and ChatGPT become more influential, how do you ensure they support human judgment rather than replace human responsibility?
Yeah, great question. To some extent, I think like any technology, there are things that you can do as a technology provider, as a person building the technology and building the products. So we talked about kind of building responsibly. And so for example, like we introduced a learning mode in Gemini so that if you're actually trying to learn, there's like a mode of the product that's explicitly designed, that we collaborated with teachers and academics on to try to actually, and like Khan Academy, et cetera, to try to build a version of the product that would operate in learning mode that would be helpful if that's what you're trying to do with the product. But ultimately, like so much is down to how people choose to deploy it and use it. Like there's only so many things you can do as the builder in technology. So I think it's really up to all of us in terms of how we use it to make good choices. And I think you can, it's like any general purpose technology. Guns can protect, guns can kill people. It's not about guns are good or bad, it's how you use guns. And so I think it's going to be true for AI too. So we're going to do what we can to try to like make the defaults, again, like we're not going to work on bad things, we're going to make try to build out functionality to make the default experience good. We're going to do a lot of work like, training educators and providing free training and free access to educators. So we're going to do what we can, but ultimately I think like all of us as people who use and deploy it have to take responsibility for it too.
All right, thank you.
Hello, my name is Sisa. I am from Valentine Ridge High School. I'm a sophomore. I actually had a few questions for you, but one of my first questions is you mentioned that you were engaged in the arts. So how do you feel about, do you think AI images are art? And do you think that AI devalues the art process, including just painting, like films, music, all of those areas?
Yeah, it's an incredibly timely question. And it's also personally, having been previously with studied arts, but also I'm actively doing a lot of work with artists right now. What I would say is there's, different forms of art have different relationships with technology. So for example, film has always been fundamentally an art form that's based on technology. Like that's film is, dependent on technology and has always kind of progressed with technology and has really embraced it. Other forms of art, music is another one. Like music is also less so than film, but also kind of embraced. Like Taylor Swift couldn't make a record without a computer. Like it's just not possible. So and there are other forms of art that have pretty much, stayed. If you think of like the opera, has pretty much stayed the same for several hundred years. So I would say art isn't really monolithic. Like different parts of the artistic community have kind of different relationships with AI and with technology. And by the way, I think that's a good thing. I would note that the ones that tend to be the most and this isn't, this can be problematic, but like the ones that are most leaned into technology, not many people go to the opera anymore. So I do think it is difficult to, I think ultimately technology is a hugely important part of art, and that continues to be true with AI. But I've also lived through, I remember, when Toy Story came out in 1994, and that's actually why I went to film school, because Pixar was this company that combined artists and computers and did what is now called CGI, or computer generated imagery. And all of the animators in animation at the time was hand drawn. So like 30 to 60 frames a second is incredibly labor intensive. And a lot of people were completely offended by computer CGI. And like the idea that you would animate a film with computers like versus humans was just considered to animators as, anathema. now CGI is everywhere. Like even, like The Brutalist, which is like the most artsy fartsy movie that wins an Oscar, has a ton of CGI in it. And so now CGI is deployed. People don't even debate it anymore. And people think of Pixar movies as art. But whereas before, people were offended by it. So like we've gone through, I think it's very natural when there's a new technology to first dismiss it. By the way, portrait painters dismiss photo. Like when the camera came out, people were like, oh, that's a really lazy way to take a portrait versus painting a portrait. And a lot of people didn't think photography was real art for years. And so every new art form kind of goes through this process of being rejected by the current generation and being accepted by the new generation, and people figure out how to incorporate it. And AI is doing that, is kind of going through that right now. Like 3 weeks ago, we screened an AI film at Sundance. 2 years ago, if we had tried to do that, we would have been like booed out of the, like we wouldn't even have attempted it. We would have been booed out of the building. 2.5 years ago when we started our AI film program, there was only one filmmaker, Donald Glover, who would even like consider working with us. Now we work with like Darren Aronofsky, who's done, Black Swan and a bunch of other kind of films where there's like a real curiosity and intent to use it. And so I think you'll see the same with AI. Like there's still going to be there'll be a whole kind of negative, there'll continue to be people who, have a negative reaction to it and don't view it's art. And that's okay. That was the reaction to photography. That was the reaction to CGI. We should expect it to any new technology. And then there's other going to be people who kind of embrace it and grow with it. And then ultimately there'll be a new generation of people who don't even know that that's a question. Like kids today watch Pixar movies. It didn't even occur to them to be offended that computers are animating things. And it will just completely disappear from the discourse. And I think you'll see that too.
And then for my second question, for countries that usually don't have like certain resources, like such as the water that is used for the cooling systems, is AI going to widen the gap between countries that have resources readily available to them and then like countries that don't, or is it going to like bridge the gap between them?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when we invest, so one thing I would say is just AI, it's important, like if AI is going to be deployed globally, which of course at Google is what we're doing, you don't want to deploy AI unto the population. So you want like AI, in Google itself, we're like we're not all based in California, we're a global company. My boss is in London, we have huge teams in Africa and India. There was the AI India Summit I mentioned last week, and we just announced a $15 billion infrastructure investment in Vizag, India, which is a city in India, where we're building subsea cables and data center infrastructure and a research team. And then we're also doing a lot of local AI for good programs, so like using AI for managing India's power grid, which is not particularly reliable, and AI for like local crop deployment. So when we invest in India, we don't just deploy India to Android phones to billions of people. Like we do very significant investments. We're building effectively a full stack AI hub in India, and we're bootstrapping India so that they'll actually, the world's most populous country, so that they'll actually be not just someone who consumes AI, but is actually part from the research to the data centers to the deployment is like part of developing and growing AI. And the reason we do that is it's important, if we don't do that, we will get the outcome that you had. You'll get a small number of people who are kind of participating in building AI and a very large population who are deploying it. We're trying to effectively scale out the building and deploying it, so it's more of an international endeavor. And India is one example, but we could share others too. And so I think that's ultimately, I think, will be you want to provide broad access at low cost, and that's something historically we've always done. Mobile technology is a good example. The largest mobile markets are actually areas of the world that were the poorest generations ago. I think you'll see similar with AI, where there's a leapfrog, and so you see like India and Africa, Southeast Asia, and other parts are leaning heavily into AI, and I think it's going to be an opportunity for them.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Marie Shindi, and I'm a freshman at Philippa Berry Academy of Technology. And my question is, does AI have less limitations that we're unaware of? Like, for example, we know that it's generated by humans and designed to program data and give us answers, but does it go deeper than that? And is it able to do more than we know?
Yeah, the short answer to the question is yeah, so we have a word for it called like a capability overhang. So even when we build a new model roughly every 6 months, and often we don't learn the new, like we don't understand the capabilities of the model fully at the time we launch it, so we safety test it, but sometimes the model is capable of things that we don't even know at launch, and that we discover or others discover kind of months after. So I would say like we're still, like we're in this kind of exponential of technology development where things are progressing really rapidly. And you know, we're still discovering you know, both limitations and things that we didn't know. And it's partly it's partly a way of the function of like how the technology is developed, where it's not, you don't kind of explicitly outline all of the capabilities it has and then kind of program them and implement them. You effectively you know, give the model, you effectively outline some objectives, and then you train a system that's good at achieving those objectives. But then often it's it learns being good at one thing allows it to be good at something else. And so for kind of well-known tasks like translation, you know, we know to check those, but we've been surprised, like our video generation model is like quite good at solving puzzles, because it turns out like to get good at generating videos, you have to develop a certain level of visual intelligence. And then that the model, even though we didn't train it for like visual puzzle solving, is like quite good at visual puzzle solving. And so I would say there are examples where we have separate teams that are actually researching the capabilities of the models that other teams are building. And we routinely find new things that we didn't know that worked. So that's why it's one of the reasons why it's still research.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Michael McCullough. I'm a senior at Providence High School, and I just wanted to talk about in China, encrypted information is being aggregated and stockpiled from like different governments across the world. This is being done in the case that artificial intelligence can get advanced enough to decode said encryptions. I'm just curious on your take on AI's role in the cybersecurity field as both an attacking agent and possible defender.
Yeah, it's a great question. So AI is arguably already having a massive effect on cybersecurity. Like we know we in other countries are you know, our cybersecurity teams are adopting AI. So for example, at Google, we had a program that we announced recently where we had been running AI on every open source project on the planet, trying to find security vulnerabilities as soon as we can. So with you know, finding security vulnerabilities in open source software is a good way that systems get exploited, because some developer takes that open source, puts it in their product, it has that vulnerability, and then people exploit it later. And so one of the ways that governments try to attack, you know, companies and countries is by finding and exploiting vulnerabilities in open source software. And there's only so many humans, and there's so much open source. The beauty of AI is you can have AI look at all the open source. So we have a program that's continuously running. Anytime new open source software is checked in anyone, we're analyzing it for vulnerabilities and then finding and flagging those so we can fix them so that they don't ever get deployed in real products. And similarly, the bad guys are also analyzing all of open source and software, trying to find vulnerabilities. So there's a bit of an arms race right now between the people building AI to find and fix vulnerabilities and the people who are using AI to try to introduce vulnerabilities. So I think that's one example. The other is, you know, AI has become very good at cloning voices. You only need about 3 seconds of speech to replicate someone. So now you know, there are these scams where you know, people mimic a relative, and then they call the parent and they pretend that the person needs money, and they kind of scam people into, you know, wiring money because they think they're talking to their son or their grandson, when really it's, you know, you're talking to an AI model. And so there's a lot of new you kind of risks that we have to, that like just previously didn't exist, that we're now also trying to figure out how to solve those. And so that's another area, like active kind of arms race, where there are people using AI for these to kind of exploit scenarios like that, and then we're also using AI to try to detect and stop scenarios like that. So yeah, it's you know, unclear where it's going to net out, but it's definitely like an arms race dynamic right now.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
My name's Brian Dell from Mallard Creek High School. I'm a sophomore, and my question was, with so many companies jumping on the AI bandwagon and buying the majority of computer memory, how would that affect like the economy in a couple of years? And will we find a stabilization, or will it just keep increasing in cost?
Yeah. Yes. For those of you who aren't aware, there's been the boom in building AI data centers has also caused a lot of growth in manufacturing servers. Servers require memory, so that and the memory, kind of in the same way COVID exposed certain flaws in the supply chain and kind of bottlenecks in the supply chain, AI has exposed a supply chain in the bottleneck in the memory supply chain. So the companies that produce memory can't produce enough memory for all of the needs. And so one is that's the good thing about these kind of like economic problems is that there's a really powerful economic incentive for those companies to produce more memory because they can make more money if they do it. So a lot of the memory producers are looking at ways they can significantly improve their production because they want to sell more memory. So I think like you'll naturally see the market solve some of those problems. In the near term, though, it's definitely having an impact. Sony announced they're delaying the next PlayStation because the price that a PlayStation needs memory, like PlayStations are they're not able to compete with data centers. And so I think you're going to see product categories that were using memory that were maybe kind of discretionary or luxury items get priced out of things. I think you'll see delay. Like some products will likely get delayed. Like the more discretionary products will get delayed because they can't pay what the companies can for memory. So that I think for the next couple of years you're going to see things like that. Yeah. So sorry if you like PlayStation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, my name is Ankit. I'm a sophomore at North-Meck High School, and I had a question about how you see AI progressing in the future, especially from where we are right now. I see that we're at a stage of where big data is getting really leveraged in the field, and we're going deeper into large language models and deep learning. So I wanted to see your view on how we're progressing from that in the future.
Yeah, how AI is progressing. I think kind of in one of the questions we talked about the three scenarios, the kind of minimal, moderate, and the rapid. I think we're more in the more moderate progression where it's going to be pretty significant, but I don't think, I still think if you look at say 3 years from now, or 4 years, 2030, I think you're going to it definitely be some changes, but it's not. I don't think the world's going to look dramatically different in 4 years from now. But there will be some kind of big, in the way that there have been some big changes in the last year or so. You'll continue to see that. I think if you look in the longer term scenario, like 2050 instead of 2030, I think things are going to look really different. Right. I think we tend to kind of underestimate. We overestimate what happens in the short term, but we underestimate what happens in the long term. And so I think we'll see in the kind of 20-year time frame. I think we'll see. It's difficult to predict, but I think we'll see quite a few. I think the economy will look very different. For example. Right.
And another question I had was, I'm taking AP Stats right now, and I kind of think to myself, how is statistics and mathematics overall going to get leveraged in AI in the future?
Well, first of all, I love statistics. I didn't take statistics until college, and I remember my dad was a math teacher. I was giving him a lot of crap, and I was like, why didn't we take, all of this calculus? Like, statistics is way more valuable than calculus. Like, why did I have to learn all this calculus? Why didn't I learn statistics? I think statistics is insanely useful. I think statistics actually should be, if I were to redo the math curriculum for public schools, I would actually push back on the calculus, and I would pull in statistics and discrete math because I think they're kind of more, calculus is fine, but I think it's just much less widely applicable than, say, statistics or discrete math. So I would just say, it's great that you're taking statistics. So much of, so many fields require a statistical understanding. And in decision making, there's a great book called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. She's a professional poker player, and she writes great books on how to think and make decisions. And as you know, poker is just statistics. So much of kind of core how you think about decisions and how you make decisions and how you evaluate options. So much of your day to day is effectively a statistical process that that we all run in our head, but we don't actually have them out in the way that a kid can catch a ball on a parabola even if they haven't studied geometry. Your brain knows how parabolas work even if you don't know intentionally how to compute a parabola. It's the same with statistics. You're running statistics all the time in your head. You just don't necessarily have the understanding and kind of language. But if you can have that, it's insanely valuable. So anyway, I think having a basic understanding of statistics is unquestionably valuable in general. In case of AI, it's even more valuable because these models are just big, like AI models are just big statistical models. That's actually how they work. Like if you start to dig into like how AI works, it's I mean, there's a lot of math, but like a lot of it is statistics, and so that will also help give you a better understanding of the technology itself, which, like I said, I think it will generally, especially when we're going through this transition, will be useful in the same way that I imagine, learning how engines worked was far more relevant 100 years ago than it is today.
Thank you.
So we have time for one more question. So please go ahead.
My name is Marvin Bruce, and I attend Philip Berry High School. I'm a freshman. My question is, do you feel like the way AI is being used by humans right now is the correct way, or surprising, or did you already expect it?
Yeah, it's interesting. So AI has been widely, it's been rapidly deployed, but it's not widely deployed. So if you look at, say, chatbots like ChatGPT and Gemini and some of the other chatbots are some of the fastest, like if you look at adoption of like how quickly a product got to 1 million users or 100 million users, chatbots have been some of the most quickly adopted products in human history. But, I would say like AI is by no means widely adopted. Yeah, like it's still narrowly adopted. There's a huge, if you're to look at like who's adopting it, how they're using it, it's still quite early, and so it's getting broader. But I think it's still early days. So I think people are still figuring it out. So I don't have a ton of value judgment of like how people are using it or not using it, because I think we're still kind of collectively learning what it's good for. I think like I said in the kind of example on students and schools, I think there's a lot of value in learning it just to understand how the technology works. I think that's like, even if it's not necessarily, you're not productively applying it to something and like get your schoolwork done, I actually think there's a lot of value in just like understanding the technology in the same way that, understanding social media is valuable, because it helps you kind of interpret the contents of it. Like understanding how a social media algorithm works is helpful. Even if you're just scrolling TikTok, you'll be a much smarter user of it. And then I think it is interesting to try to apply it in specific areas. Once you feel like you have some of the basics of the technology, and there are some areas where that's super productive, and other areas where it's not, and that's where we're just kind of still early in the process of deploying it. I think ultimately, like most AI though is going to be consumed without people being aware of consuming AI. Like if you, in the same way, when you were using Google search pre-AI, we were using machine learning models to like better understand the documents and better understand the queries to like better match your queries with your documents, and like so like people were using, or Google Translate, people were using AI, like billions and billions of people were using AI, and they didn't know it because it was just making the products and services, as they use them today, kind of better. And so I think you're also going to see more of that, where just you're going to see smarter law firms that are just adopting AI, and you just as a consumer experience it as like a better law firm, or you're a car that drives itself, et cetera. And so I think most of the deployment is actually going to just happen, or you use a cancer drug that happened to be designed with AI, for example. So I think most of the AI deployment is ultimately going to be like that. It won't be people consciously using it, except for obviously like I think people having a universal personal assistant is something that might, and you could see the next 5 to 10 years that being something that that fundamentally changes kind of how people can operate in a way that they don't today. But yeah, it's still early, so there are obviously the bad things. We talked about like cybersecurity and scams, and there's certainly like the bad things that we worry about that we see, but mostly it's not. We don't view the way people using AI as inherently negative.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all our students today for coming with your excellent questions for Mr. Collins. And if we can together, please thank Mr. Collins for spending the morning with us and answering all of our insightful questions. Thank you. Students, please stay seated for a couple minutes. We ask you to fill out our post-dialogue survey. Your teachers will have QR codes for you, and it should be displayed on the screen behind us as well. So please fill those out, and thank you all for being here today.